everyone, my name is Genesis and I am a member of Skadai. As you know by now, Skadai is a student center for diversity, advocacy, and inclusion. We are an organization maintained by students for students whose aim is to foster a more inclusive and diverse environment in higher education through committed advocacy. Now, I know you're used to just seeing me in these vlogs, but for today, I am accompanied by my lovely Skadai team, whom you will get to see a lot more and learn a lot more with in future videos. So for today, we will be covering the last pillar of Skadai, namely the A in Skadai, advocacy. However, those of you that have been following us since the very beginning 2 years ago might remember that the A in Skadai didn't always stand for advocacy. Actually, it was awareness. So why did we decide to change our name? Let's dive into a little bit of Skadai history. In 2019, we were all second-year students in our study program at the Hansa University of Applied Sciences. And we originally just got together to fight this one racist incident that had occurred in a classroom. However, we quickly realized after, having opened up that conversation that the problem within our institution went beyond the one racist incident. So we decided to form Skadai, the Student Center for Diversity, Awareness, and Inclusion. Because at the time, from our own experiences and from the research we had conducted, we believed that what was really necessary to fight these issues within our institution was just more awareness. And then 2020 happened. And after the killing of George Floyd by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, in the US, that sparked a much needed uproar against institutionalized and systemic racism all around the world. We were seeing all sorts of institutions release statements and claim their commitment to fighting their own systemic and institutionalized racism and their own internalized white privilege and white supremacy within their organizations, while at the same time, our organization remained silent. So we made a petition to demand of our organization that they take action against institutionalized and systemic racism. And that's when we realized that we needed more than just awareness, that our institution needed more than just awareness. So we changed the A in Skadai from awareness to advocacy, and we got to work. Now, Skadai is a platform for marginalized minority groups to share their experiences and their stories through mediums such as our podcast. It is also a space for learning through mediums such as our social media and this very vlog, but it's also a place where we execute committed advocacy for institutional change. And we do this by all the hard work that happens behind the scenes. So today we want to tell you a little bit more about what advocacy is. And I'm gonna let the rest of my team do that.
In order to understand what it means to advocate for students on matters related to diversity and inclusion, it is important to understand the meaning of it. That's why we have decided to give you an explanation and to outline the main differences between the concepts of activism and advocacy. Activism is seen as a set of actions that are directly being taken in order to achieve certain political or social goals, whereas advocacy is thought of as an act of publicly representing an idea, a person, or an organization. It is often seen as an umbrella term for several different intervention tools. These intervention tools can, for instance, include methods such as writing letters, meeting with politicians, active lobbying, or what we, for instance, did is starting petitions. To be an advocate is to speak and learn about social and political issues, and it is to bring attention to injustice and to help activists in their fight against that same injustice. Advocating can also mean to amplify the voices of those who often go unheard. When comparing these two concepts, you cannot really determine which one of them is the more successful one. Actually, both of these concepts often go hand in hand, and one oftentimes doesn't even work without the other. I mean, look for instance at our team. We're all different activists who come together to advocate through the platform that we have created with Skadai. We have decided to focus on advocacy since it seems to be the most appropriate intervention tool for our organization, since we aim to advocate for institutional systemic change and to bring attention to injustice circumstances within the institution.
In this part, we will be talking about how to advocate for others. In order to advocate for others, it is important to know what type of advocacy you want to do and how to advocate in an effective manner. Advocacy comes in many different situations, and in many ways, you may already be an advocate. So for today, I'll be telling you about 4 types of advocacy that you probably already know or are practicing. The first one is self-advocacy. So most of us are already self-advocates. You are a self-advocate every time you speak up for yourself or others. It could be in the form of telling your friend that they hurt your feelings, or more simply asking about the correct change at a supermarket. So this one is more like a simplified version of advocacy. The second one is individual advocacy. It's another type of advocacy where it refers to supporting someone when they need help or trying to find a solution when someone has a problem. Example of this is helping people who are experiencing homelessness, helping animals in need, recycling clothes, or just in general your stuff to those who need it more or who you feel like you could donate to. The third one is community advocacy. This refers to a more amplified version of individual advocacy, but community advocacy involves groups of people acting to bring about positive change. So think about your local communities or nonprofit organizations, and also volunteer groups. Example of this is like Greenpeace or GFN as well, and I would also say us as Skadai. The fourth one is political or systems advocacy. This relates to having an interest in politics, policy, and making a difference. The goals of system advocacy is to change policy rules or laws on a particular issue, and this can happen at the local, national, or international level. But the gist of it is that both either the individual or organization, they want to engage in changing the system. So now that we know the types of advocacy, we also need to learn how we can be effective advocates for others. And the tips that I'm going to highlight now, it could refer to any of the types of advocacy that we talked about, and they are not only specific to only one type of advocacy, but just in general. To start with, before you want to advocate for others, you have to establish your motivation. What is your purpose to achieve a social, political, economic change? And most of the time, if you are not able to establish your motivation, advocacy in the long run will not be successful. So an example of this in relation to myself is that my motivation for advocacy started when I wanted to know how I can advocate for the eradication of systemic racism. It's a topic that me and my friends and family, we spend a lot of time discussing because most often it directly affected us. So starting from there, it kind of propelled me to learn more and advocate for diversity and inclusion in terms of like ethnic backgrounds, gender identities, sexual orientations, social and economic status, abilities, religious beliefs, and many, many more. But like anyone else, I'm also still learning, but this was like my starting motivation. The second step to be able to effectively advocate for others is it's about preparation. Like most things in life, good advocacy is about preparation. So you must remember that information is power. So the more that you can inform yourself about a particular issue or situation, the better you will be able to speak and inform on that issue. You cannot be an advocate for others if you are not willing to learn and continuously learn about those you are advocating for. Another one is like you have to be a confidant. So acting as an advocate for others means people may confide in you. Your goal is to create an environment where people feel safe to share and connect. In doing that, someone may share information that is difficult to understand or shocking to hear. So in that, you kind of have to focus on the person and not their actions. So you offer them support in a positive and non-judgmental way. And depending on the type of advocacy that you are doing, you may need to set up spaces that enable people to, confide in you. The other form of how you could be an effective advocate is through communication. We know you probably hear this a lot, but communication is key, and it is also a building block for effective advocacy. So be deliberate in the choices of language you use when talking with someone who needs support. So communication is not only about how to talk to others, but it's also about listening, sharing stories, and amplifying the voices of those you are advocating for. And lastly, you have to focus on determination. Often, advocacy does not provide immediate results. Some situations may require more persistence and efforts to achieve success or have things resolved. In reality, advocacy at times can be frustrating, intimidating, but your motivation and purpose has to be greater. So, if you want to be an advocate, you must stay determined and, just go back to your motivation and keep trying.
So, the best way to ensure inclusivity and equity institutionally is to incorporate it into the organization's core from day one. Unfortunately, this is not the case for many institutions which have been in business for many decades already, or maybe even centuries. So, as we need to reform our institutions, there are several key steps that especially higher education institutions need to take into consideration when embarking on the path of substantial change. Step number 1, substantial change cannot happen if the research teams, the policy makers, the decision makers are all not representative of the group they're trying to make changes for. In the specific case of higher education institution having different minority staff and students, in the creation of inclusion policies, strategies, research, and decisions is absolutely essential. Think about it. How can inclusion and equity be achieved if the process to getting there is not inclusive of diversity? Number 2, if you're an institution that lacks essential perspectives of people with diverse backgrounds or walks of life, then invest in connecting with organizations or student initiatives which have experience or knowledge on these matters. Working with external parties can help institutions keep themselves open to their own shortcomings or blind spots. Constructive criticism should be always welcomed and encouraged. Learning from the mistakes that have been made in the past is the only way institutions can grow. Number 3, one policy, one strategy, one diversity and inclusion team is great, but it does not resolve all issues of exclusion. These are just the first steps in the journey towards equitable higher education. In order for substantial change to happen, anyone who is somehow involved in the student's life cycle, university life cycle, must be fully on board. This can take a lot of time, which is why long-term investments of different resources have to be made. Because in the end, this is an investment in people, and that is the most valuable and long-term investment to be made. And number 4, that is the curriculum. Part of the long-term changes require a critical eye in evaluating what parts of the curriculum do not serve an equitable learning environment and evaluating how these can and must be changed. And number 5, this one is just simply repeating. Even if you've checked all the boxes from 1 to 4, always go back and improve. In our current state of affairs, advocating is an ongoing cyclical process and not necessarily a destination, at least not yet. If you are curious to find out more about diversity, about equity, about inclusion, we have covered these topics in our channel before. So if you want to get a little bit of the basics and some insights on those, do check them out and let us know what else you want to know about.